although it's been a while since we visited with him, Dr. David Aikman. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tim. How are you?
I guess good afternoon. Where are you? You're over there near Washington?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not too late, I guess, to say Happy Easter.
Amen.
Thank you. Enjoy the wonderful time of the Lord's resurrection.
Amen. David Aikman with us for the next 20 minutes or so. David, before we get into some of these topics that we have time for, we'll get to as many as we have time for. Tell our listeners your work and your website and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you. I'm a writer and I teach history at Patrick Henry College. I have a website called davidaikman.com, which is not as up-to-date as another website, kidnappedingaza.com, which is based on a novel that I wrote last year. And one of the things I'm doing currently, Tim, is I'm co-sponsoring a young Christian writers opportunity award called the Aikman Award, co-sponsored by Patrick Henry College and a generous Christian entrepreneur from Canada. What we want to do is to launch a new generation or raise up a new generation of Christian testimony writers. You probably remember John and Elizabeth Sherrill, who wrote books like The Hiding Place and about Corrie ten Boom and God's Smuggler, about Brother Andrew smuggling Bibles into Eastern Europe. What we want to do is to get young people into the habit of looking out for these exciting stories of Christian testimony and writing them down. And the deadline for the first part of the award is the end of April, and you can find out all about it by looking up aikmanaward.com.
Well, David, you've traveled the world. You've written for Time Magazine and other publications. Always when we have you on, I'm just curious, what is getting your attention in terms of world events right now?
Well, fundamentally, North Korea. I think it's a very dangerous situation because you've got a young man who's untested, who's new to the job. I mean, to promote a guy to 4-star general when he's 27 years old is a little bit excessive, I think. And then North Korea's apparatus of sort of deification of the leader, turning him into a sort of demigod, that is likely to send power to a person's head. And when you've got an untested leader who has got his hand on a hair trigger of possible nuclear war, it's something really to be concerned about.
You know, David, I certainly agree. I'm not an expert. You're a professor of history and have traveled the world on these kinds of issues. But I can read, and so I see Korea, North Korea, South Korea, on all the headlines, the situation that you've laid out. My understanding is that North Korea, like a lot of places in Asia, Southeast Asia, shame-based culture. Is it possible that we could have a war there simply because North Korea gets backed into a corner through the kind of bravado that we're seeing? And it seems like an unlikely way for a war to start on that peninsula, but I mean, wars have started for dumber reasons than that.
Right. Wars have started several times through miscalculations. One side miscalculates by raising the rhetoric of belligerence, which North Korea has done. And the other side could miscalculate by overreacting to that belligerence. The U.S. has to tread a very fine line here of presenting enough sort of counteractive force to let the North Koreans know that if they start anything, they'll really suffer for it, but not pushing too many buttons to cause the North Koreans absolutely to go haywire. So we really need to pray for wisdom for the Americans who are responding to this.
My understanding is that North Korea has regional capability when it comes to nukes, may be able to reach Hawaii or even the U.S. mainland. But in terms of regional, let's say, God forbid, frankly, because it would be a terrible thing for, they have hundreds of thousands of artillery pieces and, targeted on Seoul. But let's say that they decided to launch some nukes regionally, U.S. bases, Japan, whatever. What is the state of our anti-missile capability in terms of the ability to shoot down these missiles once they're launched?
Well, I think there is an anti-missile capability for some U.S. bases provided by U.S. Navy ships equipped with the anti-missile capability, but I don't think all of the vulnerable bases in Asia are protected by the same ring of anti-missile defenses. And, you only need one missile to get through to trigger an incredible chain reaction of nuclear holocaust. I mean, it's really an unimaginably horrible situation to contemplate. So let's hope that it never gets that far or anywhere near that far.
I've wondered, David, talking about North Korea, they're in the news every day now. I mean, with these threats and so forth and so on. But yet we're treating them like, at least this is my sense, American people go, oh, well, another crazy threat, another day.
Another crazy leader in
Got this
North Korea.
Almost like a little chihuahua snapping at your heels,
Right,
and you're
right.
trying to have a conversation with somebody, and you're like, look down every once in a while going, get away from me.
Yeah.
And so you're not really taking it that seriously.
Right. I mean, the trouble is somebody who cries wolf too often doesn't get listened to. And, we've heard so many cries of wolf about North Korea in the past, and they've certainly done some horrible things, that this latest episode causes a lot of people just to shrug and to sort of brush it off as yet another inconsequential action. But unfortunately with North Korea, they are so fanatical and so irrational in their sort of bellicose rhetoric that we don't know for sure when they're just saying wolf, wolf, and nothing's happening, or when they're really about to launch something.
The other day, David, the premier of China, what's the gentleman's name? Do you know? Anyway, he's the leader of China. How about
Right.
that?
Well, do you mean the party secretary Xi Jinping?
Yeah, he was in Moscow.
Right. Yes.
He was you had the leader of China in Moscow, and it sort of speaking to the Russian Parliament or whatever they call themselves,
Dumas.
and he was talking about criticizing the influence of the United States, getting involved in other countries' business, if you will. It's kind of like the old, coalition of Russia and China saying, we need to fight back against the imperialist Americans.
Right.
That was kind of that was kind of the theme that I got from the story that I was reading. What about that relationship between China and Russia? Is that something we should be concerned about?
Well, to the extent that any time they might gang up together to seriously impede American presence in the Asian region, that is something to worry about. I don't think they're likely to form the sort of close relationship alliance that they had during the 1950s when both countries were sort of irrevocably communist. But Putin is a very pragmatic man, and he will take any ally he can get that serves his purposes. So
What are his purposes? Why is he sort of stuck in the 60s? Putin, I'm talking about. He's a KGB man. Does he sort of spend his days trying to figure out how he can needle America? You know, even though we don't seem to have any interest, at least I can tell, in doing any harm to Russia.
Yeah, well, I think you have to remember that the Russians have an inbuilt paranoia, at least many of them do, about what the rest of the world intends for them. And there is a stream of political analysis in Russia that seriously believes that the United States and the West in general has done nothing for the last 1,000 years but plot how to make Russia weak. Well, that sort of paranoid line of analysis ties in with Putin's own upbringing as a KGB agent, when the United States was referred to as the main enemy on the global scene, the main enemy of then the Soviet Union. So I think Putin has enough sort of influences coming from both his own background and from the Russian political environment around him to be very suspicious of the United States in any capacity at all, and to want to look for any allies who could potentially assist Russia in standing up to America.
We're talking to David Aikman. And David, what's your website again?
DavidAikman.com, and also AikmanAward.com, about the writing contest.
David, in the event of we're kind of switched a little bit to China. In the event of the outbreak of a hot war on the Korean Peninsula between North and South Korea. Now we've maintained, I think, 28,000 troops in South Korea, and that's always been my understanding. That was always something of a tripwire,
That's right.
It was
yes.
a kind of a deterrent, not only to North Korea, but for to keep the Chinese from rolling down the peninsula, because you would instigate a war with the U.S. if you'd have to kill U.S. troops. In other words,
Right.
In the event of a hot war in between North Korea and South Korea, what is the likelihood that China would enter the war once the U.S. Began to aid its ally in South Korea?
Well, that's a sort of dangerous area to speculate on, and hopefully China would never think of entering such a war. But China has long provided rhetoric about its relationship with North Korea as close as lips and teeth. And if China wanted, China could switch off North Korea in 50 minutes by denying it the huge food resources it supplies every day, and by cutting off its fuel. I think China has been seriously neglectful of its responsibilities in reining in one of the most dangerously unpredictable regimes in the world that is capable of starting a nuclear war. So China could save the day by saying to North Korea, look, guys, we're on your side, but we don't think this kind of saber-rattling rhetoric is a good thing right now, so please back down. It would be great if the Chinese did that to North Korea.
I was wondering about that, David. China, they seem to, when you talk about China, I mean, it's the largest country in the world by far. And so it's hard to, I've even had people tell me you go to one part of China, it's different than another part of China, so it's not in terms of how things
culturally
and how restrictive they are.
That's true, yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct.
But China has, I guess 20 years ago we were having the conversation among even conservatives who were saying, some were saying we shouldn't be so engaged with China in terms of business because we surrender our voice on human rights when we're trading money. And then there's the other side, school of thought, who said, no, we need to be engaged financially and business-wise with China because that's a way to lead them into more freedom and opportunity and expose them to at least the Western values that they're not they're not used to. So